battlefield, because if you look at it, it's like it's not really practical. I imagine you can't really see out of it that well. And so, but for jousting, all you have to do is stay on the horse and just go forward until some dude pegs you in the chest, I guess. My name is Richard Dix, and this is How Did That Happen? A podcast where I look at everyday things or events and try to figure out how they came to be. Every week, I will research one topic, and by the end of the episode, I hope to truly have the answer to the question, how did that happen? All right, welcome back to another episode of How Did That Happen? This week, we're going to be talking about helmets. I'm going to try to cover all the different helmets, cover all the different heads for people throughout the world. We'll see how it happens, how I do with it. This is one that I struggled with for a little bit, just because I don't know. You can't make everything interesting. Like, maybe I can. Maybe that's where I fall short. But I try. I do try, and I do teach you a lot. Just, is it worth it? That's a question I've been asking myself about a lot of things. So, 7 days a week, you can always find more things about HDTH. How did that happen? Over at hdthappen.com. There you will find episode transcripts as well as pictures and videos for every episode. I always try to put my works cited up there so you guys know exactly where I'm getting my information from. I'm not trying to come from this higher level of I know everything. It's more about I am just researching all this and trying to share it with the masses. There's also a blog on there with articles that are written by yours truly. Read them if you like. If not, that's cool too. What am I watching right now? I just watched Shang Wang Sweet and Juicy on Netflix. I did, and it was a hilarious comedy special. This is not a plug. I was working out on the bike and I wanted something to watch, and so I actually watched it from start to finish. I've never heard of this guy before, and it just popped up on my feed for Netflix. And when I tell you, if you like comedy, he's funny. He's an Asian guy from Houston. He actually says he went to the same middle school as Beyonce, which is a pretty cool flex. But he's funny. Shang Wang Sweet and Juicy. And I also just finished White Lotus season 2. I watched season 1 a long time ago, whenever it first came out, and I honestly have forgotten about a lot of what happens, which is cool because it's kind of an anthology, not quite an anthology series, but they have a whole almost entire new cast of characters around a couple of the same characters from the last season, which I think is a pretty cool way to do it. And I waited till the last episode came out so I could binge it all. It's really hard to describe to people because I've had to try to describe what it is, but it's a really good show about some rich people at this resort. And season 2 really kicks up, and it's the kind of show where you want to keep the secret. So though I'm not going to give any spoilers because I wouldn't want anybody to tell me. I'd rather just find out like the way that I did. Let's see, what am I listening to? I'm a big fan of Matt and Shane's Secret Podcast. It is a fun hang with those two guys. It really is. It always makes me laugh. I wasn't sure when I first started watching it if I was actually going to enjoy it, but I really do. Shane Gillis is hilarious, and the other guy, Matt, I don't even know his last name, but yeah, he's pretty good as well. And I also listen every week to Two Bears One Cave. Been doing that for a while. Been listening since the first episode. I love both those comedians, Bert Cast and YMH are two big inspirations for me. It was actually some of the words that I heard on Birdcast that inspired me to even do my podcast, because he talks about the idea of finding your voice, and that when you first start a podcast, you expect it to be what you see for all these people who had them for so long, but you really have to just kind of let it be and let it find its way. And he mentioned multiple times that let the first 50 episodes just not be good, and then that just keep working from there. And I've definitely tried to. I always hear that in voice in my head before I start. So yeah, I'm definitely those are two podcasts that I would definitely check out if you are looking for something different to listen to. As always, we have a mini-sode on every Thursday that comes out at 4:30 a.m. that kind of profiles different people in history that I don't think are getting talked about enough. Let's see, this most recent one was Napoleon Bonaparte. He had a really interesting life. I tried to make his interesting as well. I think the thing that I thought was the wildest about him is just his exiles, and the fact that he was exiled twice. And the first time they exiled him, they let him run the army that was exiling him, and then they're surprised that this guy shows up less than a year after he was exiled. He just slips away. It's like, come on. So obviously, they learned their lesson. The next time he gets exiled, spoiler alert, he stays there, he dies there. But it's a good episode. Go back and check it out. We always have more coming up. Those are also the transcripts for those are also on hdthappen.com. And as always, if you like what you hear here, as I always like to say, the hear here. If you like what you have heard on HDTH, leave us 5 stars in anywhere you listen to podcasts, or if you want to leave us 2 stars and then say why you didn't want to give us 5 stars, I like that too. either way. But without further ado, we're going to learn about some helmets today. So here is the show. So the word helmet is derived from the word helm, which is an Old English word for protective head coverings. And when you really look at it, there are a lot of different types of helmets. I never really realized how many types there were until I really started to look into this stuff. You have bicycle helmets, motorcycle helmets, war helmets, hard hats or construction helmets, what have you. Just all different types of. When I first thought about it, the first thing I thought about was just bike and construction helmets, right? But when you really dive into it, there is a lot here, and we will try to get to most of it. On this episode, I really try to explain how all these different types of helmets kind of came to be and live amongst each other. So the first helmets were invented around 2500 BC. Some of the most ancient empires out there, like the Akkadians and Sumerians, were some of the first used helmets. This would have been around the 23rd century BC. The first mass-produced helmets were worn by the Assyrian soldiers around 900 BC. And they were mainly made from bronze, and they were made to protect the wearer, again, from sword blows and arrow strikes. So that brings us to Roman and Greek helmets. The Greeks used a helmet that was made from a mix of ivory and boar's tusks, and this is a really cool helmet that I when I found it, I thought this is one of the cooler ones that I've seen. It was used during the 17th, between the 17th and 10th century BC in the Mycenaean culture. I don't think I actually got a name for what it was called, but it was made through the use of slivers of boar's tusks. So they would like really get these little thin kind of slivers of this hard material, and they were attached to a leather base, padded with felt, and in rows. And I'll definitely be putting a picture of this on the Twitter page, possibly, or at least it'll be on the transcript on HDTHappen.com. And one of these boar's tusk helmets, is what we'll call it, appeared in in Homer's the Iliad. And this was, I guess, right around the time when Odysseus is armed for a night raid against the Trojans, and he has this boar's tusk helmet on, but it is believed to be an heirloom, at least during that time. Because what we find, and what I mentioned earlier, is that the first helmets for soldiers and stuff like that, it wasn't like everybody gets a helmet. It all looks the same. It's like if you want to protect your head, you make a helmet, and then I guess through trial and error, they keep looking and see who keeps surviving these battles, and then they probably start making, helmets that look like the guys who survived the battles. There's another Greek helmet is the Corinthian helmet, and it originated in ancient Greece. And I feel like people were more familiar with this one when I saw this. I definitely was like, oh, I've seen that in a lot of different movies. I think it might have even shown up in 300. And it took its name from the city-state of Corinth, and it was made of bronze, which in later styles covered the entire head and neck with slits for the eyes. And that's what I think really stands out as far as something that you see before. It's almost a full like mask, fully covering the face, but there's like these small slits that run down the cheeks that for you to be able to see. And that's, for me, as far as like these old helmets go, that's one of the only ones that I've seen, and I could identify them. Like, oh, I know, I've definitely seen that before. Whereas the other ones, you're just like, if they say it's old and looks old, you just kind of believe it. But the Corinthian helmet was depicted on more sculpture than any other helmet, which is kind of why I'm saying it seems like you see it so much. And it does seem that the Greeks were romantically associated with the glory in the past. So when they really want to reminisce, and go and think about the good days of old, that's the helmet they choose to put on their soldiers. So then we move to the Roman helmets, which I didn't have a lot to say. The Roman helmets, I think, because they're not as easily, like I said, I don't know, it's hard to describe them, and I don't want to sit here and just read descriptions at you because that's just, no one really wants that, but I'll list a couple, and then there'll definitely be pictures on the website. So there's what's called a Galea helmet, which was one of the early Roman helmets, and it tended to borrow designs and styles from the various Etruscans and other people of the Italian peninsula. There's the Montefortino type, right? And that's why I'm like, I know when I'm reading this to you, you have no idea what it is, and I can barely describe it to you myself. So there will probably just be listed up there with like the actual name, so you can see it and kind of understand it later. There's the coolest type, which is somewhat like the Montefortino type. I don't know. But yeah, then we'll move on to medieval helmets for like knights. Knight helmets were usually called the Great Helm, and it was usually worn over chainmail hood. And other names for it include the bucket helm, the barrel helm, and the pot helm. Just a lot of different helms in there. And we did cover knights. I believe it was on episode 17 of HDTH. So you definitely want to go back and learn how they happen. It's a very interesting episode. But while looking all this up, I actually found a website that will sell you medieval knight helmets. They will do it. And they are moderately priced, might I add. You can get a medieval knight helmet like the Epic Dark Sugarloaf helmet, which is just awesome in name alone, for about $115. Which, when you think about it, it's not that bad. Or is it? I don't know. But there is the website out there. I don't think I have the link to it, but if I found it, you can definitely find it. And so the initial great helms eventually led to what was then known as the frogmouth helm, which is, prevailed throughout the 1400s to the 1600s. And this is something I think people have seen a lot. You see a lot in movies as well. It's like the top part of the helmet is very smooth, like it's straight, and it kind of leads right into almost a mouth that is met, from the bottom part, and it kind of just does look like a frog's mouth. I think I've seen it in Disney and Pixar movies, but I never knew what it was actually called. It was actually called a frog mouth helm. It was made primarily for jousting. It wasn't actually made for the battlefield, because if you look at it, it's like it's not really practical. I imagine you can't really see out of it that well. And so, for jousting, all you have to do is stay on the horse and just go forward until some dude pegs you in the chest, I guess. And now we will turn our attentions to helmets of the 1700s and forward. Some British gamekeepers during the 18th and 19th centuries wore helmets made of straw that were bound together and cut with bound together with cut bramble. The Europeans at this time can also be seen in what is called a pith helmet, Pith, and this one is actually pretty interesting because you've seen this one, and you see this in a lot of movies as well. You see it when people go on safari. It's the one. It's usually kind of a beige or a khaki color, and it's got a short brim, maybe like a brown strap around the base, and it's got a little point on the top. I've seen it a million times. I just never knew what it called. I never really knew the history. I'm gonna try to share that, a little bit of that with you right now. Like I said, it is a safari hat. It actually originally comes from the Filipino headgear called the salakot, which is a dome-shaped headgear with a brim that actually extends further than the pith helmets. But basically, when the Spanish came and colonized the Filipino islands, they basically kind of took that hat, the salakot, and kind of molded it into their own version of a helmet, and that's how you actually get the pith helmet. The French also did the same thing when they came to Indochina as well. So it's when you may not recognize it when I say it, but I swear when you see it, you'll be like, oh, that I know what that is, because it's just used. Everyone's seen it. I think it was in Pocahontas, honestly, maybe. And so now we're gonna get to hard hats. This is actually pretty interesting. I'm trying to make all this stuff. I'm trying to put some sort of spin on it, because I will tell you. I've been working on this episode for a few weeks, and I kept compiling information after information, but I couldn't find a through line for it all like I normally can to kind of just make it worthy. I mean, but besides just sitting here throwing facts at you guys, but it is really hard, and so I'm trying to slip it in during the holidays, maybe when people are a little more busy, and I can get on to the next thing, because it's just like I want to get it done, because I've done it. I've done all the information and the research of it, but I don't know. We're hoping to really try to make this an actual, kind of try to button up this the idea of the history of helmets. So we'll move to hard hats. And so in 1882, the patented pulp manufacturing company produced the first ever mass-produced hard hat to protect workers. So the British company, who later became the Centurion Safety Products company, manufactured a helmet from pulp, which was mixed with lime and fed into a former, and then the formed hat was left to dry and lacquered to give it a smooth or slightly textured finish, and a steel plate was riveted to the inside of the helmet to give it further protection. I'm sure that could not have been comfortable. We'll definitely get to the cradle part of the helmet here in a second. So yeah, like it says here, although they were pioneering, they were really uncomfortable, because you're basically just putting a steel bowl on your head, you know what I mean, and wearing that for hours and hours and hours. And yes, I'm looking, and I've looked in a couple different websites, and it's hard to find who actually made the cradle for the helmet. They just say an American did in 1919, which is helpful, but not completely. But we get to now where the creation of actual more modern hard hats, and this comes from a man who really found, I guess, the need, of course, for a helmet. He was in World War One. His name was, let's get this guy's name, Edward W. Bullard. Right, so in 1919, he comes home from World War One, having seen all the horrific things that have happened from there. I've mentioned some movies that I've watched on the podcast before about World War One, and they're really good. I mean, All Quiet on the Western Front is good. Also, 1917 is good if you really want what I would consider to be accurate depictions. Obviously, I was not there, so I can't say, but like from what I've read and then seen, movies, they're the best ones that really depict all the horrificness that existed during that time. But so he was there, and he just saw how people really, their lives were saved by having a helmet on. So he really thought about ways to make the kind of implement that into modern society to help save normal people in different workplace environments. So he is really kind of almost the father of at least American like modern safety hats, if you will. He created what was called the hard-boiled hat, and this was a canvas and leather headgear that was first commercially available. It was actually the first commercially available protection device in America, and it was worn by millions of workers. It revolutionized the safety product industry, and it actually got him in the Hall of Fame for national inventors, which was kind of cool. He did a lot of work with mining helmets. What they did, let's see that they explain how it was made. Let's see if I have it down here, because actually, or maybe I didn't put it in here, but they literally would like steam the hats to get them to be the shape of the person's head, which is how they got the term hard-boiled hats, because they're like, they're using like hot water and steam basically to kind of get it to work. But so it was around, I want to say the 1930s when hard hats started to become mandatory on job sites. Up until then, it wasn't, and it wasn't really until I believe they were building the Hoover Dam, and then also when they started building the Golden Gate Bridge. It was around those two times, which is around the 30s, where they started having to say, hey guy, you got to start. You got to wear a helmet, dude, because we're losing too many of you guys from just getting pumped on the head from different screws and falling debris and stuff like that. Let's see. So that's going to bring us to helmets for motorcycles, and then we're going to get to helmets for bicycles, and I think that's going to be about it. And then we'll get on to the next segment. I will be talking about the history of football helmets and the things I did not know before. So that's just a little teaser for you there. So motorcycle helmets. So in 1914, British physician Dr. Eric Gardner, he commissioned a shellacked canvas to protect the rider's head. They were first used in the Isle of Man Double T, which was a big motorcycle race during that time. And they immediately, believe it or not, saw a decrease in concussions. So that kind of became the standard for a little bit there. And then there was a man by the name of T.E. Lawrence, who was fatally injured in a motorcycle accident in May of 1935. His friend was a doctor who, having seen or heard about it, realized that had he have had a better constructed helmet, he may have actually survived that crash. And that led him to go and kind of change his. He was a neurosurgeon. He kind of changed his research into head trauma in 1940. And he published in 1941 a article in the British Medical Journal that really emphasized the importance of a crash helmet to help lower the amount of head injuries in motorcycles. And after the Second World War, this journal was used by the Ministry of Transport to further investigate head injuries and their mechanisms. This all led to the first motorcycle standard in 1952, which was followed 2 years later by the first hard hat standard. And this is all in Britain, by the way, not in America. The light duty safety helmet standard. And so by 1954, they were both standards in the country. You had to, have a motorcycle helmet of some sort, and then you also had to have the hard hat when you were doing construction work. America would not follow suit until 1964, when the U.S. Department of Transportation first created their first ever safety standards by which motorcycles had to adhere to. Also, 2 years later, Congress passed the U.S. Highway Safety Act, which specified that states would have to have helmet laws on the books in order to get federal funding for their highway development. And so now we're going to get into give you a quick history of bicycle helmets, and then we're going to get out of here and get on to the next segment. So before there were bicycles, there were these things called Dryzines, and I had never heard of that before, but they're made by this guy in Germany, and I'll be putting a picture up on this on the transcript as well on the website. And they look kind of like a bicycle, but there's like no chain, and the handles look different. It's actually pretty wild. to know that, I don't know, because you look at bikes and you think, oh, where did they get that idea from? But it's like there's always something before. And I'm not saying the people who made bikes, stole it from the Draisine, but I'm not even saying I'm pronouncing Draisine correctly. It's probably not Draisine. We're just going to go with, because I'm not German. So yeah, in the early 1860s, the first true bicycle was created in Paris, France, by attaching rotary cranks and pedals to the front wheel hub of a dandy horse. Old dandy horse. And so the Olivier brothers, Rene, I always love that they named dudes Rene in France, Aime, and Marius, that's a cool name too, recognized the commercial potential of this invention and set up a partnership with a blacksmith and bicycle maker Pierre Michel. Cool French names. They began the first mass production of bicycles in 1868. And they had the first bicycle craze during that time as well. This was in America and Europe, but right after all that happened, the kind of craze kind of died down. And I say all that to say that they weren't wearing helmets during a lot of this time. The 1890s saw another bicycle craze, which was driven by several significant developments in bicycles. The invention of what they called a safety bicycle, with its chain drive transmission, smaller wheels. That, I guess, made it a pretty cool bike. I don't know much about cycling, so that was like all Greek to me. The first bicycle helmets that were used were designed like a hairnet, but with large leather prongs molded in the shape of a hairnet. I've seen them out. Definitely post a picture. It looks like it's not, just big, thick little leather things that go around their head. And as you would expect, this only really helped with cuts and scratches and didn't really provide much protection from impact. And when asked about their effectiveness, one cyclist was quoted as saying, "They don't help at all in the initial impact, but they keep your ears from being ground off when sliding over the pavement." So I guess that's something. I should have, end quote, actually, I was parroted. The last little bit was me. I guess that's something. I guess it is. Bicycle helmets didn't really become mainstream until the 70s. This was because bicycles for a long time were considered children's toys unless you were doing something like actually competitive on like a circuit like that. People just weren't out here riding bicycles, I guess. So what we'll do is gotta go back to go forward. I got to the 70s, but I'm going to go back to the 50s for a second, because in 1953 there was a revolutionary invention that propelled helmet science, and this was done by C.F. Lombard, who was a professor at USC. He developed a helmet that actually absorbed impact, and this was innovative and important because it had 3 layers with a hard fiberglass outer shell and an impact absorbing foam in the middle layer and a padded inner liner for comfort. So Roy Richter, a famous race car driver and founder of Bell Helmets, took this design and created the Bell 500 model. And I think we all kind of know, not specifically what that one looks like, but we all have a picture of a Bell helmet. If you had some sort of childhood, you had that foam Bell helmet with maybe some crazy design on it, but the bottom was all like white foam and it would get kind of dirty. And I don't know. Fun fact though, while we're talking about helmets, helmets should only be used once. If you get into some sort of impact, if you get in an accident or something like that on your bike or whatever, you're supposed to go get another helmet. I'm sure it probably says that somewhere, but I'm just putting that out there because we were talking about that the other day when we were talking about helmets. Not we, but some people I was talking to, but and you forget that. So yeah, just if you're out there and you've already had one, just throw it away, get another one. It's worth it. But yeah, so that's where the whole idea of the Bell helmet that we all kind of know and love comes from. I just thought that should have to be put in here because there's certain things when you think of bicycle helmets that you just have to talk about. The Snell Foundation Snell is also another company that makes helmets and is well known for it. And I didn't know where it comes from. It comes from the man named Pete Snell, who died in a car crash in 1957. So that's where the name Snell, you see it on the helmet, that's where it comes from. And that is how helmets happened. And now it's time for the roundup. And we're going to round it up. The first helmets were used in war, going back to the 23rd century BC. Greeks and Romans made helmets out of a wide variety of products. Knights' helmets were called helms. The first mass-produced hard hat was the hard-boiled hat, named so because of the steaming process needed to form it. Things I didn't know before, and now I know them. Never heard of these things. What are they? Alright, so for the things I didn't know before, I have two things, I guess. One's really quick, and the second one is just I realized once I had done most of this, I never really included anything about sports helmets. I'm really just going to do football helmets because I feel like there's a lot going on there, as you would imagine. Before we get to that, I will mention that we talked about helms during the medieval times, and even they had so many different types of helms during that time. They even had a funeral helm, and so it'd be like a specific like knight helmet they would wear during funerals, and it was just there's a picture of it on Wikipedia. I may post one to the Twitter account. It's just pretty wild looking, and just the idea that, I don't know, I'm going to a funeral. Let me put on my funeral helmet. It's just something I never thought I would say or see. So yeah, we'll get to helmets in football. So in 1888, college football started to allow the tackling below the waist, which really created a need for some more protective padding because I guess they were really out there and started to hit each other a lot more. And one of the first known helmets was designed specifically for a Naval Academy midshipman. It was made by a Maryland shoemaker, but the midshipman's name was Joseph Reeves. And this man had been told by the doctors that he should stop playing football because he could die, because he had been kicked in the head so many times from playing so much football. So instead of heeding, his doctor's advice, he, commissioned this Maryland shoemaker to try to make some sort of protective device for his head so that he could play in the 1893 Army-Navy game. It was said that this quote-unquote helmet was made of moleskin. So, you hate that gets kicked in the head so many times your doctor says the next one might kill you, and you're just like, slap some moleskin on there. 1940, we see John Riddle and John Riddle Jr. They make the first actual like plastic helmets or like shattering. I don't know what's the word. I guess they're just plastic. Yeah. In 1940, they stopped using leather. But the problem was, that they did shatter so much, and that's why the NFL was actually not really trying to use them for a while. So they actually had to change up their design, and that's where we get the actual real look of a football helmet that we have today. They designed it in the shape of a teardrop, which kind of allowed the impact to kind of slide off to either side of the helmet instead of absorbing it kind of head on, which would keep the shattering to a minimum. And once they did this, and then the actual plastic helmet became legal in 1949 in the NFL. Let's see, I have a couple more maybe interesting facts. Only interesting if you like football or you like technology and helmets. Sorry for people who don't like football. Let's see. The first logos on helmets were initially intended to help the quarterback see which receivers were actually his downfield, and this was done by the Rams, the Los Angeles Rams. They were the first teams to actually don any sort of logo on their helmets. The last NFL player to play in a game without a helmet was a man by the name of Dick Plasman. He did so with the Chicago Bears in 1940, and that's just wild that even in like the 40s there was a guy out here playing football without a helmet. All right, that's been another episode of How Did That Happen? I hope I was able to make helmets interesting for you guys. I think I did find a couple little pockets of light there to make it, worthy of your ears. As always, thanks for pressing play. If you want more of what you just heard, you can head over to hdthappen.com, where as always you'll find the written version of what you just heard, as well as photos and videos, and the works cited that helped me create the episode. Like and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Give us 5 stars if you feel so inclined. If you want to give us 2 and tell us why you won't give us 5, that's fine as well. We'll see you guys in a few days with the next episode of Bite Size Bios.